The Resident Evil series is one of the most iconic video game series ever, one of the big precursors of survival horror and the zombie genre, mixing interesting and unique elements like the setting in which the game takes place, enemy design, protagonist encounters, and weapons, to make it an interesting, horror-fueled, action-packed experience. I grew up playing Resident Evil, and it's a series that is special to me, only topped by Silent Hill. I'm not alone when I say that the setting of Raccoon City is a fan favorite place, and that every time we get to explore the city, the streets, and the iconic buildings, it is going to be just a fun time. When RE2 Remake was announced, I was just so surprised that I couldn't believe it, and when 3 was announced, I was just hyped as hell. While both games have suffered a shared amount of criticism for making several changes when compared to the originals, like Claire and Leon sharing a similar path in the remake of 2, or cutting the clockwork level in 3, I can't even begin to tell you how rewarding and beautiful it is to have 2 of my favorite games in a new and fresh engine with extremely great graphics and engaging gameplay, and for once, a challenge. They have kept me busy with the S Plus ranks and Hardcore and Inferno modes respectively. And while I'm getting off track, I can talk about this too for a long time, but my goal right now is analyzing the 2 of them as a separate entity of the franchise. Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes are perfect, divorced games from the rest of the franchise. As usual, I'm going to divide this into a handful of chapters that can hopefully support my argument, and by no means am I suggesting the other RE titles are bad. I think each is unique in its own special way. Starting with the setting, it's simply brilliant and extremely iconic by now, and a place that needs literally no introduction, Raccoon City. Late 90s, early 2000s, and when we see it during the outbreak, it is absolutely quite a dark place that seems so lived in, right? The city is filled with impressive and eye-catching places, beautifully decorated, especially the downtown area, and despite it feeling like a huge place when we break it down, we play in relatively small areas. When the zombie apocalypse started, everything just stopped, everything turned into chaos, and seeing Raccoon City after it is so strange and both cool and lonely, especially when it is raining at night. And when you consider these feelings of despair and hopefulness, well, there's no way of saving the city, it's doomed, but maybe there's a way to save yourself. But yet, it feels so pretty, so inviting to explore, so beautiful in a way. This reminds me of how beautiful Fallout can be. It's a desolate and hostile and extremely depressing place with a tint and ambience that constantly reminds you of the nuclear apocalypse, but it's beautiful in its own way. Arcee's bluish undertones, dark areas in contrast with well-lit places, and the beautiful design of the city make it an unforgettable setting. I know this doesn't sound very new or fresh, especially when we've had our fair share of zombie content as a society for the last 10 or so years, but I still think it stands today. The concept has aged well. RE2 takes us briefly through the streets, but mostly through the beautifully crafted police station with its gothic-like architecture and museum-like structure, locked doors that require odd but very pretty keys, and the various rooms and its underground areas and secret passages, as well as a few other places like the orphanage, Jill's apartment, the downtown area, and both games takes us through the sewers and respective nest laboratories, which serve as extremely good refreshers for the setting. All of that mixed with the gory and horror action of the game, the lore, the environmental storytelling, and player agency makes this such an awesome pair of games. I especially love how the characters play a little differently, not only when it comes to weapon selection but the movement as well. While Jill is a trained operative and survivor, Claire and Leon are just capable first-timers. The story of these 2 games is simple, but there are a lot of details surrounding this simple story. The basic and short version is that a pharmaceutical company known as Umbrella has been developing and experimenting with viruses, and they have secret laboratories in Raccoon City. And this was their personal playground. Here reside abominations like the Hunters, Tyrants, and Lickers. There's way more than this, obviously. Important people working for Umbrella, and there is also their personal story. There's corruption in the police, the previously mentioned Nest laboratories, the involvement of third-party members like Nikolai and Ada Wong, the situation with STARS, the Special Tactics and Rescue Service that were the police special unit involved in the incident a few months back in the Arklay Mountains, and more, but decompress it, and it is just a very simple concept: zombie infestation caused by an evil corporations. There are survivors in the city who are trying to escape but find themselves in difficult situations while in the meantime try to discover the truth. But the thing is that it just works so well. One of RE's strongest features is its characters, and I want to start with the protagonist of both games. Claire Redfield is a college student who's in town looking for her brother Chris, a high-ranking member of STARS and a survivor of the Arklay incident. Leon S. Kennedy is a rookie cop on his first day, so he's just arriving in the city, understandably confused but very ready to help out. Both are inexperienced people who haven't been into situations like this one before, but once they find their way into the city and try to accomplish their goals, the disappointment hits. The city is gone to hell, and well, Leon doesn't have a reason to stay, but as an officer of the law, he wants to help and see who caused all of this and see them get justice. Claire doesn't find her brother here, but Chris is somewhere else doing something important. I say that on quotes, and well, the logical thing to do is to get out of there ASAP now that there is nothing more to do, except she finds Sherry and she's committed 100% to help her escape, because after all, she's just a little girl. She doesn't even deserve to be in this mess, and they start bonding, and it's like a really cool sister relationship. They're both heroes, extremely noble and resilient, and they're both underdogs. They're not soldiers or experienced killers or anything, they're just people against all odds with understandable goals and relatable and fun personalities. And then we have a slightly different cast of characters, quite the opposite, in RE3. Jill Valentine is a highly experienced and trained officer, a member of STARS, so she's experienced with BOWs, but she's not unrelatable. She's very down to earth and sassy, and at least tries to cope with the situation she finds herself in with a little bit of comedy. She's also willing to help, and she's not afraid to put herself in harm's way to protect others. When we start the game, we get time to know what kind of person she is. We get to see that she has nightmares, probably some of the PTSD from the events of RE1, and she's having a hard time in general. We can read in a note next to a pizza box that she has been suspended from the PD, and details like a messy apartment and lack of lights might tell us she's not in the best place mentally. And we also have Carlos Oliveira, a member of the UBCS working for Umbrella. Yes, the bad guy, only he doesn't really know it yet, and he's kind of blind regarding the situation, and us players are probably not. But if we think about it, he's just another victim here, right? He's genuinely trying to help other, and he's kind of selfless, and when he finds out about Umbrella, I think he tries to make up for his actions. Did I mention he's funny? Because I think it's kind of funny and charming and very entertaining to just play as. So what this does is that we get to experience the apocalypse from two sides and experience and play through different journeys, sharing similar goals, atmosphere, and engaging gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, the over-the-shoulder camera, the gunplay, the movement, the weapons, inventory management system, and puzzles make up such an entertaining, fun, and challenging game. Or well, games. It feels good and natural to move around. It retains older mechanics that comprise the RE formula, but it maintains the feeling of survival horror, making use of its limited resources and saves, thought-provoking inventory management, and fun puzzles. A lot of the gameplay consists of knowing how the enemies behave and simply act accordingly. Sometimes fighting is not even your first choice if you consider it this way. It's about making decisions with the way you play. Am I skilled enough to run around without healing items? Do I need extra ammo? Do I need this other weapon? Perhaps I don't need this grenade, etc, etc. Well, consistent tactics are present in repeated playthroughs. The gameplay can be random at times and enemies might take you off guard. Lickers, Mr. X, Nemesis, Armor Zombies, IVs all behave differently, and you have to adapt to their behavior. Although you are not forced to play a certain way, you can be a minimalist and run around with a pistol and maybe a knife and no healing items, or if you want to feel safe in the tight corridors of Raccoon City, you can bring your best guns to survive the apocalypse. Or prepare yourself before a boss fight. The gameplay is very dynamic and, like I said, engaging. We even get extra levels of what if type of scenarios in 2 and various challenges to keep ourselves busy. like higher difficulties, S plus ranked runs, second rounds, unlockables, etc. The game handles completion and the feeling of it in a way that makes us feel good. Maybe now feels dated, but it continues to be effective. Something Resident Evil 2 and 3 does remarkably is the enemy design, both in behavior and looks. I think we can all agree that the Lickers, Mr. X, and Nemesis are downright some of the most iconic enemies in video game history. Period. The boss fights are pretty neat as well. Even the regular zombies are amazing. Dogs are very cool as well, and they all have different behaviors. They're gross, and in RE3's, spiders are some of the most disgusting enemies ever in my opinion, and you can take different approaches with the enemies. There are different strategies to deal with them, and while the game leaves a few hints here and there, it never feels like it holds your hand. Metaphorically speaking, players will learn to fight them one way or another. Coming back to Mr. X and Nemesis for a second, those encounters are heart-racing. The fact that they chase you and that their presence is intimidating, I think is great. They do make the atmosphere more dangerous, and they also make you feel vulnerable. They create this panic and urge to constantly run. In these two games, we get minuscule stories about minor characters that surround our main protagonist. The story of the Birkins and their daughter Cheryl, who's had a rough childhood, Marvin, a police officer who's been through a lot, Kendo, the legendary maker of the Samurai Edge custom Berettas, and his last moments with his daughter, the Umbrella Security Service trying to retrieve the sample of the virus, and the Grim Reaper, Hunk, his story of escaping and survival against all odds. And seriously, his escape mission is just very challenging, and his Death Wish-like attitude and methodical approach to things can be very scary in its own way. Also, Ada Wong, who is a very mysterious character with questionable intentions. Even others like the police chief and various deceased persons, the reporter, etc. They're all decent, and I love how we get complimentary notes and info, and even if we don't truly know the characters or we don't fully understand them, I feel like the short time we get with them is just simply good. And how could I not mention Brad? He went from a simple, disposable character for the shock in the original RE3 game to a pretty cool guy for the brief amount of time we get with him in RE3 Remake, and his sacrifice makes him just a much better guy in my opinion. The game has small powerful moments like said sacrifice, Jill leading Nemesis away from the subway, Carlos using the vaccine on Jill, said vaccine getting destroyed, Leon getting betrayed by Ada, Kendo's last moments, Annette's sacrifice, and the bonding moments in the train with Claire and Cheryl. Taking everything I said into consideration, I think RE2 and 3 Remake are both amazing titles, awesome separate entries from the franchise. Every game is its own self-contained story, I understand, and every game from now on has a connection of some sort with these two, but if you were to consider them as they are, separately, separate remakes, I think they're damn amazing for all of the previous reasons that I mentioned. There is simply no comparable experience of action survival horror. I mean, I do not believe saying RE2 and RE3 are literally one of gaming's most iconic and important titles ever to be released. I don't think saying that is necessarily exaggerated. I have such a strong love for these two games. They're so amazing and some of my favorites. I'm a big fan of the franchise, but 2 and 3 will always be my favorites. That's why I even thought of covering them as a separate entity for the purpose of this script. One of the reasons why I love the RE franchise is its characters. Claire and Jill are some of my favorite protagonists. I guess in general in games, they're extremely likable and down to earth.
We need to reach Fox Park Station. Can you program that in?
Hey, I'm Super Cop. Consider it done.
And at the same time, while I do like other games as protagonists, I can't connect with them in the same way I do here. Maybe with Sheva I can make an exception. But even the tiny interaction with Hunk is so neat because his brief mission tells you so much about him. They accomplish this storytelling with the gameplay on just a single level and some voice lines, and he has so much personality despite him appearing only briefly and having just a handful of lines, like I said, and I think that's something commendable. We get to like the characters we play as most of the time with so little information about them. I don't dislike other RE characters or titles, but for example, I couldn't care less about Ethan even if I wanted to.
Sorry, Ethan.
I know these games are not perfect, there are flaws, but as separate titles existing in a bubble within the RE universe, as RE2 and 3 remakes, they're perfect. To me. Thank you so much for watching, it means a lot and I appreciate it if you can leave a like. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. And well, I'm just so happy that I finally got to talk about the RE2 and 3 remakes because they're really amazing games. You should play them totally if you haven't, and I know most of you have. I just have this hunch that most of you have played them, and I'm just glad I finally got the chance to talk about them. This script has been sitting in my folder for a very long time, and I'm just getting around to finishing this particular video. There are more videos coming, and well, thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment if you like. I love to hear what you have to say. Once again, thank you so much for watching and take care.